A documentary on Edgar Lee Masters by Carla Saucedo and Helen Rocha. Edgar Lee Masters was born on August 23, 1868 in Garnet, Kansas. He died on March 5, 1950 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Throughout his childhood, he grew up on his grandfather's farm. As he grew older, Edgar Lee Masters became passionate about becoming a lawyer, just like his father. Edgar Lee Masters was determined to become a lawyer, despite his father's financial struggles. Masters attended Knox College for a year and was forcefully put out because of his family's finances. He then continued to study privately. In 1881, he was given admission to the bar. He then became a successful lawyer for 8 years. Throughout those 8 years, he defended the poor. Even though he was a successful lawyer for many years, he still had an interest in writing. He ultimately just wanted to write about the people in Illinois town. To follow his dreams, he began to write poems to Marion Reedy. Marion Reedy didn't publish them, but he gave Masters a copy of J.W. McHale's selected epigrams from the Greek anthology. Masters then adopted the idea and combined free verses, epitaphs, and realism to write Spoon River Anthology. Spoon River Anthology was published in 1915. It was a collection of 245 free verse epitaphs. The poems in this anthology consisted of residents of Spoon River who decided to reveal their secrets from the grave. These were secrets that were kept hidden throughout their whole entire lifetime. For the most part, they revealed disappointments and failures. Spoon River Anthology became the most popular books of poetry in history. He then focused more on writing than he did on law. He continued to write books, novels, plays, and collections of poetry. In 1917, Masters left his family. He divorced his wife in 1923. In 1920, Masters actually gave up his law firm and moved to New York City. Then, in 1926, he remarried. Her name was Helen. He received many awards later. For example, one of them was Poetry Society of America Award. One of the poems from Spoon River Anthology was George Gray. I have studied many times the marble which was chiseled for me, a boat with a furled sail at rest in an arbor. In truth, it pictures not my destination, but my life. For love was offered me, and I shrank from its disillusion. Sorrow knocked at my door, but I was afraid. Ambition called to me, but I dreaded the chances. Yet all the while I hungered for meaning in my life. And now I know that we must lift the sail and catch the winds of destiny, wherever they drive the boat. To put meaning in one's life may end its madness, but life without meaning is the torture of restlessness and vague desire. It is a boat longing for the sea and yet afraid. The speaker in this poem is George Gray. He is speaking to the living of Spoon River. This ghost, George Gray, lives at his grave and wants to talk about his mistakes so others won't repeat it. The theme here would be remorse. He feels regret and guilt. He is now dead, but he truly can't do anything about it. This poem lets us know that life without meaning is a life not worth living. George Gray ultimately wants us to know that if you don't take the chances that we are given, we won't accomplish anything. He was given so many chances to strive, but he never opened the window. He wanted meaning in his life, but he didn't allow himself to take advantage of those choices and opportunities he could have made to let himself strive. I went up and down the streets, here and there, by day and night, through all hours of the night, caring for the poor who were sick. Do you know why? My wife hated me, my son went to the dogs, and I turned to the people and poured out my love to them. Sweet it was to see the crowds about the lawns on the day of my funeral, and hear them murmur their love and sorrow. But oh, dear God, My soul trembled, scarcely able to hold to the railing of new life, when I saw M. Stanton behind the oak tree at the grave, hiding herself and her grief. Decided to mention M. Stanton at the end because he might have had a romantic relationship with her. That is why his heart/soul trembled when he saw her in grief. Doc Hill is full of pathos. It talks about a doctor who spent most of his time with his patients and the poor and also the sick. So mostly his life was just centered on his profession. He had no family life, so he looked for people who needed help, such as the poor and the sick, as I mentioned before. He wanted to pour out his love and kindness onto. When he died, he achieved what he was trying to achieve his whole entire life. He wanted people to surround him with love.
Another poem by Masters, known as Silence, touches upon the underlying fears, questions, and mysteries of life that are all around each of us and which no one fully comprehends. Silence is about our inability to express ourselves, not only to others, but to ourselves. In this poem, he lists the wonders of nature, the tragedy of sickness, death, and the unfaceably recalled horror of war. Through it all, we are the animal. In this poem, he states, we are the voiceless in the presence of realities we cannot speak. Masters paints marriage and parenthood as a tragedy, a bridge never quite crossed, which to those who have lived it, there is an underlying truth to that. He states, with words out to come, there is silence even though we be misunderstood of it. The theme in this poem is that silence is not necessarily a bad thing. Silence can show many emotions than language. For example, in his poem, he expresses about an old soldier who is struck into silence by a range of emotions after being asked about the silence of great hatred. Though one might not tell another of his true thoughts, those who know him best, in fact, will be able to tell what they are thinking through silence. Another Greek poem by Masters is The Hill. The Hill is the very first poem of the anthology and one of only two written by Citizen. The Hill serves as an introduction and establishes that all the characters are dead and how the plot will be told through their deaths, not lives. The imagery in this poem is straightforward. The reoccurring phrase that is the most important form of imagery in this poem is sleeping on the hill. By repeating it throughout the stanzas, it intensifies the emotional impact of the phrase. One can picture the hill as a cemetery and those who are sleeping as the deceased. In this poem, Master uses dramatic free verses and a lot of repetition. Figurative language is seen in the repeated line, all are sleeping on the hill. Each person dies in ways that coincide with how they lived their lives. During this time, American literature was surrounded by realism. Realism is the attitude or practice of accepting a situation as it is and being prepared to deal with it accordingly. The Civil War had a major impact. The United States grew rapidly and so did democracy and literacy. Many used the impact of the Civil War to draw attention to the writing and to make people's imagination grow bigger. Realism swept the nation, and one of the writers who was mostly impacted was Edgar Lee Masters. He used realism to make people look at their past. In his case, people looked at their past from their grave. Filmmakers, Carla, Saucedo, and Helen Rocha. Music composers, David Grubbs, Arthur Russell, George Mendes, unknown. Images, the internet. The Saints Company, success and failure.